Hello, and welcome to another basketball edition of the Adrienne Ross Show. I know you never know where I'm going to be, right? Sometimes I'm upstairs in my living room. Sometimes I'm downstairs in the family room. Sometimes I'm in the office with the blue behind me. Here's the deal. Thank you for hanging with me no matter where I go. I am actually in the planning stages of creating a permanent studio setup, but that's going to take a couple weeks at least. So again, I appreciate your patience. Also, I want to thank you for subscribing to the channel. And if you have not done so, I encourage you to do so. Also to join membership. All right, let's get into today's topic. Recently, there's been a lot of conversation about some old video footage that surfaced somehow of A'ja Wilson talking to Kelsey Plum, her teammate, about Paige Bueckers, who should be in the WNBA after this NCAA series. It had to do with white privilege. Some of you may not have seen it, so check this out.
Us as black women, Paige reminds me a lot of you. Like, you say you're not really about me. And she knows how her privilege has gotten her to that point. And also, like, she's good at basketball, obviously. But, like, she understands her privilege. It's like what pushes her over the top, in a sense. It reminds me a lot of you. And I mean, that's a compliment.
Now, it should come as no surprise that people had something to say about that. It takes a whole lot of nerve, a whole lot of gumption, a whole lot of temerity, unmitigated temerity to look at someone and say to that person that, this person who is privileged and understands her privilege reminds me of you. Because, she's a great basketball player and everything, but she's, woke enough to know that she's privileged. And for Kelsey Plum, who is a great scorer, who's done great things, who no doubt has worked extremely hard, she was just told, mind you, it was said that that's a compliment. Well, she was just told that it's been her privilege. Now, A'ja Wilson is also the person who said at the beginning of Caitlin Clark's professional career that a lot of the hoopla was because she's white. Very interesting that this footage surfaces of her. Obviously, she means what she says, guys. She says what she means what she says. She sat there right next to Kelsey Plum, and Kelsey Plum just kind of looking at her, but yeah, the compliment is that you've got privilege, and that's why you are where you are. And I'm trying to figure out, honestly, everybody, it seems like A'ja Wilson runs everybody. Somebody to be able to just say that, and you don't check them. You don't say to them, wait a minute, what are you talking about? That means that you've just been drinking the Kool-Aid, or you're too afraid, or whatever. But it seems like she kind of runs some shows. A'ja Wilson, you got to get your shoe before Caitlin Clark gets her shoe. And listen, I don't doubt that A'ja Wilson is a great teammate. By all accounts, they all speak very highly of her, but there seems to be some kind of something surrounding A'ja Wilson. We talked about this in my live the other night. What is the deal? And when you look at that video, you really go, what is the deal? Listen, I wasn't looking for it. I just happened across video footage of Isiah Thomas. You know Isiah Thomas, the NBA legend from the Detroit Pistons, the bad boys of Detroit. Isiah Thomas. Footage from when he was a basketball player in 1987 after his Pistons lost to Larry Bird's Celtics. He said something that is seriously reminiscent of what A'ja Wilson said. Check this out.
The rivalry was already strong, but Isiah Thomas added fuel to the fire when he echoed Dennis Rodman's comments, saying that Larry Bird would be just another player if he wasn't white.
A very, very good basketball player. I think he's an exceptional talent, but I'd have to agree with Rodman. If he was black, he'd be just another good guy.
If there was
Isn't that something? Isn't that something? Larry Bird, if you were black, if you weren't white, you'd be just like everybody else. You'd just be a good guy, and laughs about it. Very, very interesting. So I did a little research because I like to do that, right? I want to see the whole picture. So I looked up to see if there was any backlash, if there was any repentance over those comments, because I'm looking at that and I'm going, wow, A'ja Wilson is saying in 2024, even now, I don't know when those comments specifically were made about Paige Beckers, but we know what she said about Caitlyn. We know the whole thing. We know how the race baiting goes and all that stuff. But in 2024, which is where we are right now, she's making these comments. Isiah Thomas in 1987, I'm thinking, wow, there's not much difference there. They're still looking at people who are accomplished, who are talented, who are gifted, and who work hard and have the nerve to tell them it's your privilege. So I did some research. How did that shake out? Let's take a look at how things went down for Isiah Thomas and how he responded after he made such comments. So here's an article. It was actually just written in September on the Basketball Network. It says Isiah Thomas on the aftermath of his racial remarks about Larry Bird. Quote, I'm more hurt about this than I am about losing the series. Zeke, as Isiah Thomas was known, said he cried for days. He cried for days after making a controversial statement about Bird. It's interesting. I wonder if A'ja Wilson had time to think and cried about her words. Just curious. But it goes on to say that Isiah Thomas was so distressed after Game 7 of the 1987 Eastern Conference Finals that he cried for days. However, the Detroit Piston legend wasn't upset about losing to the Boston Celtics, coming up that short of making his first NBA Finals. Instead, Zeke was affected by the heavy backlash he received for his racial comment on Larry Bird after the game. He said, I'm more hurt and disappointed about this than I am about losing the series. I'm hurt. My family is hurt. My mother's crying. And I can't believe this is happening. Interesting. Let me just come back to you here for a moment. He's hurt. His mom's crying. His family's hurt. He's getting all this backlash. Now, fast forward to 2024. I know that there are some podcasters talking about what A'ja Wilson said, because she basically said, although she tried to say, yes, she's a good player, Paige is a good player, Kelsey, you remind me of her, you're a good player, but still, it's your privilege. This coming from a person who grew up and went to apparently a great school, had a great upbringing, but if it weren't for the color of my skin, things would be different, according to A'ja Wilson. So when this happens back then, Isiah Thomas feels so bad about it. He feels worse about that than he feels about losing this opportunity to win a championship, to go on to the next round. Do we get that same kind of do we see that same kind of backlash nowadays, or do people feed into that nonsense and egg it on? And so we see it time and time again. We hear it time and time again when we just want to talk and hear about basketball, and we're having to hear people whose games are diminished because they've been told that they've gotten there because of their privilege. He felt extremely bad about that backlash, about what he said. Well, let's find out. Let's move on. He goes on to say, let's see where we left off. Zeke said he was misunderstood. Dennis Rodman was the first, as you heard in the clip, was the first to make the racist remark on Bird. The Worm, that's Dennis Rodman, said that the only reason Larry won 3 consecutive NBA MVP awards was because he was white. Now, A'ja Wilson, she's won 3 MVP awards, not consecutive, but 3 MVP awards, and she's not white. But anyway, the only reason why he won was because he was white, Dennis Rodman had said. However, Thomas drew more flack for his reaction than his Pistons teammate. Now, calling it the worst thing that has ever happened to his NBA career, Zeke said that his comment was not misquoted, but misunderstood. So he goes on to explain. Somebody turned to me and asked me what I thought, and I said Larry was a very good basketball player, but if he was black, he'd be just another good guy. I thought the reporter was trying to compare him to Bill Russell and all, and I just said it to be sarcastic. I'm sure that I was laughing after I said it. Now, he apologizes. He defended himself by saying that Bird has been somebody he had praised ever since the Celtics forward joined the league. To say the opposite would have contradicted everything he said or felt about Larry Legend, this says. He says, though, I'm sorry that I said it, and I'm sorry that everybody didn't know the real Isiah or couldn't distinguish that I was kidding. And it goes on to say, to his credit, he reached out to Bird, and they made it all right. And if you do some more studying on it, research on it, that Larry Bird wasn't even worried about it. He says if he says he was kidding, I'm sure he was kidding. And emotions are high. He just lost the Eastern Conference Finals, so I get it. But he's saying that he was joking, but he still apologized for it. It still made him feel bad because he did not want to be seen as someone who would make such denigrating comments. So he acknowledged it. He recognized it as something that was not a good thing to say. He was joking. But of course, he's saying he was joking, but he felt bad because he was like, I wouldn't even say that. I've always said complimentary things about him. But he felt bad enough to feel bad about it. We're living in a time now where they don't feel bad about it. This is what they say, and they're supported by a whole league who apparently agrees about this whole privilege thing, again, diminishing the work that people have put in and the accomplishments they have. But you see the difference. He felt bad. Nowadays, it's like that's accepted, that you can actually look a person in the face and tell them that you're there because of your privilege. Well, let's look at another article about that backlash. Okay, so in this article, also from Basketball Network, this one was an early article, and it says Isiah Thomas faced serious backlash for his comments about Larry Bird in 1987. And a quote here, I was accused of being a racist, and I'm a bad guy now. Bird never took Thomas's comments personally, believing they were said out of emotion. So he was very gracious about it all. But yeah, this was in 1987. Again, he would be just another good guy if he weren't white. And those comments were made after the Detroit Pistons lost to the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. But again, Isiah says, my mistake was in joking in a manner and with someone who did not fully understand that I was joking, Isiah said, admitting he was being affected by it. Okay, so he was painted as a bad guy, and he failed to advance to the NBA Finals. But in addition to that, the second overall pick in the 1981 draft admitted that everything that transpired during that period deeply affected him. I lost a game, was accused of being a racist, and I'm a bad guy now. So yeah, he's kind of, like, I'm a kind of a poor me attitude, but it did show that he recognized that if he were not joking, and I guess I'm just taking his word, he's joking, but he recognizes that that would not be the comments to make. So, and again, Dennis Rodman was the one who said it, and Dennis Rodman said it first. He said, I was very frustrated at the time. I was wrong. And honestly, that is not the way I feel. It was a mistake on my behalf, Rodman said at the time. So yeah, and then Bird, again, he was very gracious about it all. But I just wanted to point this out because when I first saw this, I'm like, my goodness, this is like the same mess going on all these years later. But then I see Isaiah's attitude about it. His attitude is there was complete and utter chaos. Notice the difference in the culture in which they were living. In that culture and in that league and around him, there was a lot of backlash for something like that. Nowadays, people just go on eating their soup. A'ja Wilson says what she says, and it's divisive and it's delusional, I think, when you're dealing with people who have a record of achievement and hard work. It's not like we're talking about scrubs, right? We're talking about people who've worked hard and have deserved the accolades that they've received, as we have seen from Caitlin Clark's season, as we have seen from what Kelsey Plum has done throughout college and now in the pros, right? So the difference is the culture has changed so much that comments such as A'ja makes are totally accepted. Whereas we've got Isiah Thomas, who has so much backlash that he's crying for days. His mama's crying, his cousin's crying, his dog is crying. Everybody's crying. Now they look at you and say, what you crying for? You just spoke your woke truth. So fascinating how he wanted to make it plain. This is not what I mean, and I'm not going to diminish what you've done. And even Dennis Rodman, the worm, says, I was caught up in emotion. I don't mean it. I'm sorry I said it. I should not have said it. I have not heard from A'ja Wilson since those comments have, made the rounds lately. But I don't think in this day and age and with certain players, they feel that they're wrong to say things like that. And I don't know. We can learn a lot. I know there's something called progress and moving forward, but in some ways, in some regards, as a culture, we might need to step back. Yeah, Isiah Thomas shouldn't have said it. Dennis Rodman shouldn't have said it. But at least they recognized that they shouldn't have said it. Nowadays, they say that, and then they pile on. Let us know what you think in the comments. I appreciate you. I ask you to hit the subscribe button if you haven't done it. I'll catch you next time, God willing. God bless you abundantly.